Leonardo pushes at the idea of realism in ways that have never been achieved in Western art to this point.
It's just bursting with energy. It's a sort of breathlessness and a freshness.
Had an ambition of thought that would have singled him out in any community.
Genius, originality, inventiveness, imagination.
He's doing things that
provide a unifying factor that turns a good picture into a remarkable one.
Now we can only get a hint of just how beautiful it must have once been.
Who was Leonardo da Vinci? Leonardo da Vinci was a Renaissance painter, sculptor, architect, inventor, military engineer, and draftsman, the epitome of a true Renaissance man. Gifted with a curious mind and a brilliant intellect, da Vinci studied the laws of science and nature, which greatly informed his work. His drawings, paintings, and other work have influenced countless artists and engineers over the centuries. Before we begin, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. Da Vinci was born in a farmhouse outside the village of Arciano in Tuscany, Italy, about 18 miles west of Florence on April 15, 1452. Born out of wedlock to respected Florentine notary Ser Piero and a young peasant woman named Caterina da Vinci, was raised by his father and his stepmother. At the age of 5, he moved to his father's estate in nearby Vinci, the town from which his surname derives, where he lived with his uncle and grandparents. He was apprenticed to the sculptor and painter Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence and in 1478 became an independent master. In about 1483, he moved to Milan to work for the ruling Sforza family as an engineer, sculptor, painter, and architect. From 1495 to 1497, he produced a mural of The Last Supper in the refectory of the monastery of Santa Maria del Grazie, Milan. Da Vinci received no formal education beyond basic reading, writing, and math, and his father appreciated his artistic talent and apprenticed him at around age 15 to the noted sculptor and painter Andrea del Verrocchio of Florence. For about a decade, Da Vinci refined his painting and sculpting techniques and trained in mechanical arts. When he was 20 in 1472, the Painters Guild of Florence offered Da Vinci a membership, but he remained with Verrocchio until he became an independent master in 1478. Around 1482, he began to paint his first commissioned work, The Adoration of Magi, for Florence's San Donato, a Scopeto monastery. However, Da Vinci never completed that piece because shortly thereafter he relocated to Milan to work for the ruling Sforza clan, serving as an engineer, painter, architect, designer of court festivals, and most notably a sculptor. The family asked Da Vinci to create a magnificent 16-foot-tall equestrian statue in bronze to honor dynasty founder Francesco Sforza. Leonardo extolled his vast engineering skills. For the Duke, he could design bridges and armored vehicles, weapons, and public buildings. Leonardo continued work in Milan between 1482 and 1499. He was commissioned to paint the Virgin of the Rocks for the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception and the Last Supper for the monastery of the Santa Maria del Grazie. What made Leonardo da Vinci a genius? Genius takes many forms, and in Leonardo's case, he recognized his limitations. He was defensive about his lack of formal education. He called himself homo senza lettere, a man without letters. He had trouble with basic arithmetic operations, and his Latin skills were weak. He surely would not have performed well in a modern school system, and his IQ might have been tested as low. Leonardo da Vinci earned the description of genius, explains Walter Isaacson in his lavishly illustrated new biography. From iconic paintings, Mona Lisa and The Last Supper, to designs for flying machines and groundbreaking studies on optics and perspective, Leonardo fused science and art to create works that have become part of humanity's history. The Mona Lisa's smile is the culmination of a lifetime spent studying art, science, optics, and every other possible field that he could apply his curiosity to, including understanding the universe and how we fit into it. He carried his notebook around as he walked through Florence or Milan, and always sketched people's expressions and emotions and tried to relate to the inner feelings they were having. You see that most obviously in The Last Supper. But the Mona Lisa is the culmination because the emotions that she's expressing, just like her smile, are a bit elusive. Every time you look at her, it seems slightly different. Unlike other portraits of the time, this is not just a flat surface depiction. It tries to depict the inner emotions. Leonardo is a genius and a potent symbol of the universal man because of the breadth of his interests in the arts, science, and technology, spanning disciplines from chemistry — he discovered acetone — to astronomy — he discovered the lunum cinerarium of the moon — to math — he discovered the center of gravity of a pyramid — to working with plastics. Rumors about his sexuality. Many historians believe that Da Vinci was a homosexual. Florentine court records from 1476 show that Da Vinci and 4 other young men were charged with sodomy, a crime punishable by exile or death. After no witnesses showed up to testify against 24-year-old Da Vinci, the charges were dropped, but his whereabouts went entirely undocumented for the following 2 years. Ciphers and encryption. Leonardo was certainly no stranger to the use of codes and encryption. His notes were all written backwards with mirror writing. It is unclear exactly why Leonardo did this. It has been suggested that he may have felt that some of his military inventions would be too destructive and powerful if they fell into the wrong hands. Therefore, he protected his notes by using this reversed writing method. Other scholars point out that this type of encryption was fairly simple to break. One needs only to hold the paper up to a mirror to read it. If Leonardo was using it for security, he probably was only concerned about hiding the contents from a casual observer. Other researchers have suggested that he used this reversed writing because he found it easier. Leonardo was left-handed, and this would have made writing backwards less difficult for him than for a right-handed person. Recently, Leonardo has been credited by many people with inventing a device dubbed a cryptex. A cryptex is a tube constructed with a series of rings with letters of the alphabet engraved on them. When the rings are turned so that the certain letters line up with the cryptex's password, one of the end caps can be removed and the contents can be removed. If someone tries to get a message by smashing the device, the glass bottle will break and the vinegar will dissolve the papyrus before the message on it can be read. Priory of Sion. The Priory of Sion was a fraternal organization founded and dissolved in France in 1956 by Pierre Plantard as part of the supposed hoax, though researchers claim the secret society still operates. In the 1950s, Plantard created an apparently fictitious history for that organization, describing it as a secret society founded by Godfrey of Bouillon on Mount Zion in the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099, perhaps conflating it with a historical monastic order, the Abbey of Our Lady, Mount Zion. In Plantard's version, the priority was devoted to installing a secret bloodline of the Merovingian dynasty on the thrones of France and the rest of Europe. The notion was expanded upon and popularized in the 1982 nonfiction book The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, whose concluding arguments Dan Brown borrowed for his 2003 novel The Da Vinci Code. Supposedly, Leonardo was the leader of the secret group. According to the Da Vinci Code, it was the priory's mission to keep the secret of Mary Magdalene and her marriage to Jesus alive. While the Da Vinci Code is fiction, it is based on theories from a controversial non-fiction book entitled Holy Blood, Holy Grail, written by Michael Bagant, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln in the early 1980s. As a result of Dan Brown's best-selling 2003 conspiracy fiction novel, The Da Vinci Code, and the subsequent 2006 film, there was a new level of public interest in the Priory of Sion. Brown's novel promotes the mythical version of the priory but departs from the ultimate conclusions presented in The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Rather than plotting to create a federal Europe ruled by a Merovingian sacred king descended from the historical Jesus, the Priory of Sion initiates its members into a mystery cult seeking to restore the feminist theology necessary for a complete understanding of early Christianity, which was supposedly suppressed by the Catholic Church. The author has presented this speculation as fact in his nonfiction preface, as well as in his public appearances and interviews. The true story behind the Mona Lisa painting. Mona Lisa, also called Portrait of Lisa Gherardini, wife of Francesco del Giocondo, in Italian La Giocondo, or in French La Gioconde, oil painting on a poplar wood panel by Leonardo da Vinci, probably the world's most famous painting. It was painted sometime between 1503 and 1519 when Leonardo was living in Florence, and it now hangs in the Louvre Museum in Paris, where it remained an object of pilgrimage in the 21st century. The sitter's mysterious smile and her unproven identity have made the painting a source of ongoing investigation and fascination. Professor Margaret Livingstone of Harvard University makes the argument that Leonardo painted the edges of the portrait's smile so they would appear slightly out of focus. Because of this, the edges of the smile are more easily seen by a person's peripheral vision rather than by looking directly at them. This may explain why some people report that the portrait seems to be smiling more when they are not directly looking at her. Dr. Lillian Schwartz of Bell Laboratories has come up with what seems an unlikely but intriguing idea. She thinks that the subject is smiling because the artist has put a joke over on the viewers. She contends the painting is not of a pretty young woman, but is actually a self-portrait of the artist himself. Schwartz noticed that when she used a computer to line up the features of the Mona Lisa with the portrait that Leonardo had done by himself, they matched up perfectly. Other experts note, however, that this may simply be the result of the two pictures being painted by the same artist using the same techniques. The Last Supper painting. Dan Brown, in his popular thriller The Da Vinci Code, suggests that Leonardo's The Last Supper has a number of hidden meanings and symbols. In the fictional story, there is a conspiracy of the early church to suppress the importance of Mary Magdalene, one of Jesus' followers. Supposedly, Leonardo was the head of a secret order of men who knew the truth about Magdalene and attempted to preserve it. One of the ways Leonardo did this was to leave clues in his famous work, The Last Supper. The Last Supper is Leonardo's visual interpretation of an event chronicled in all four of the Gospels, books in the Christian New Testament. The evening before Christ was betrayed by one of his disciples, he gathered them together to eat, tell them he knew what was coming, and wash their feet, a gesture symbolizing that all were equal under the eyes of the Lord. As they ate and drank together, Christ gave the disciples explicit instructions on how to eat and drink in the future. In remembrance of him, it was the first celebration of the Eucharist, a ritual still performed. The Last Supper is a very popular religious scene painted by many celebrated artists. Unlike artists before and after him, Leonardo da Vinci chose not to put halos on Jesus Christ. Many art historians believe that Leonardo da Vinci believed in nature, not in God. To Leonardo, nature is God, so he's treated every character in the fresco as common people. Unlike traditional frescoes, which Renaissance masters painted on wet plaster walls, Da Vinci experimented with tempera paint on a dry, sealed plaster wall in the Santa Maria del Grazie monastery in Milan, Italy. The experiment proved unsuccessful, however, because the paint did not adhere properly and began to flake away only a few decades after the work was finished. Speculations about symbolism in the artwork are plentiful. For example, many scholars have discussed the meaning of the spilled salt container near Judas' elbow. Spilled salt could symbolize bad luck, loss, religion, or Jesus as salt of the earth. Scholars have also remarked on Da Vinci's choice of food. They dispute whether the fish on the table is herring or eel, since each carries its own symbolic meaning. In Italian, the word for eel is aringa. The similar word aringa means to indoctrinate. In Northern Italian dialect, the word for herring is renga, which also describes someone who denies religion. This would fit with Jesus' biblical prediction that the Apostle Peter would deny knowing him. What makes the masterpiece so striking is the perspective from which it's painted, which seems to invite the viewer to step right into the dramatic scene. To achieve this illusion, Da Vinci hammered a nail into the wall, then tied string to it to make marks that helped guide his hand in creating the painting's angles. At the end of the 20th century, restorer Panin Brambilla Barcelon and his crew relied on microscopic photographs, core samples, infrared reflectoscopy, and sonar to remove the added layers of paint and restore the original as accurately as possible. Critics maintain that only a fraction of the painting that exists today is the work of Leonardo da Vinci. 3 of da Vinci's students, including Giampitrino, made copies of his painting early in the 16th century. Giampitrino did a full-scale copy that is now in London's Royal Academy of Arts. This oil painting on canvas was the primary resource for the latest restoration of the work. The second copy of Andrea Soleri is the Leonardo da Vinci Museum in Belgium, which the third copy by Cesare da Sesto in the Church of San Ambrogio in Switzerland. According to Italian musician Giovanni Maria Palla, da Vinci incorporated musical notes in the Last Supper. In 2007, Palla created a 40-second melody from the notes that were allegedly hidden in the scene. In 1652, monastery residents cut a new door in the wall of the deteriorating painting, which removed a chunk of the artwork showing the feet of Jesus. Late in the 18th century, Napoleon Bonaparte's soldiers turned the area into a stable and further damaged the wall with projectiles. During World War II, the Nazis bombed the monastery, reducing surrounding walls to rubble. The fact that Leonardo wasn't the Grand Master of a clandestine society as pictured in the Da Vinci Code shouldn't lessen our admiration for him, however. While the inclusion of this historical personage in a work of modern fiction is intriguing, he should not allow it to cloud our vision of what Leonardo really did accomplish. His artworks have been an inspiration to millions down through the centuries and contain intricacies that experts are still trying to unravel. In addition, his experiments and inventions have shown him to be an advanced thinker whose explorations went far beyond that of his contemporaries. The secret of Leonardo da Vinci is that he was a genius that few people in his own century appreciated.